She had exactly 40 seconds before everything fell apart. Naomi pressed her back against the service corridor wall, her heart slamming against her ribs. Two men stood between her and the exit, big and quiet, and one of them was holding her real press badge. 3 months of undercover work gone. The taller man stepped forward. His English was precise and unhurried, which somehow made it worse. "You want to tell us who you really are?" Naomi opened her mouth, closed it. She was good with words. She made her living with words. And for the first time in her professional life, she had absolutely nothing. Then a door opened at the end of the corridor. The man who stepped through it was tall and composed in an immaculate charcoal suit. He looked at the scene, the two men, Naomi against the wall, the badge in the tall man's hand, and his expression didn't change at all. Not surprise, not anger, nothing. Just those dark, evaluating eyes moving across the corridor like he was reading a room he had already memorized. He said 3 words in Korean. Both men stepped back immediately. Then he looked directly at Naomi. She looked back at him and thought, Baek Ju-hyun, in the flesh. And he just changed the course of her life without having a clue. Before we continue, can I ask you a question? Where in the world are you watching from? Comment below because we'd love to know how far these stories travel, and hit that subscribe button for more amazing stories. I'll really appreciate it. All right, thank you. Let's jump back in. 3 months earlier, Naomi Prescott had walked into her editor's office with a manila folder, a USB drive, and 3 years of barely suppressed rage. "I have it," she said, dropping the folder on Priya's desk. "The full financial structure. Lumiere Collective has been laundering money for the Baek family for at least 6 years. Inflated invoices, ghost designers, fabricated international orders. I can document every thread." Priya, who had been editing investigative journalism for 20 years and had developed the permanent expression of a woman who expected bad news, picked up the folder without a word. She read for 4 minutes. Then she set it down. "This is extraordinary," she said, "and incomplete." Naomi had known that was coming. "I know. You have the financial crime. You don't have the murder." The word landed in the office like something physical. Priya said it plainly because she was that kind of editor, the kind who didn't soften things that shouldn't be soft. "Not yet," Naomi said. "Deja Monroe." Priya leaned back in her chair. "Your college friend. The designer who died 3 years ago at Lumiere, and whose death was ruled an overdose by a medical examiner whose report had 4 factual inconsistencies, none of which were ever publicly questioned." "Correct. And you believe the Beck family ordered it?" "I believe Lumiere's leadership discovered that Deja had found the laundering operation during her mentorship there. I believe she was going to come to me with documentation. And I believe they made sure she never got the chance." Naomi's voice was steady. She had practiced keeping it steady when she said these words, because the alternative was falling apart in her editor's office, and that was not something she had time for. "She called me 2 weeks before she died. She said something felt wrong. I told her to document everything and come to me when she had proof. And she left me a voicemail 3 days later saying she had it. I was in the field on another story. I didn't check my messages for 6 hours." Naomi looked at a fixed point on Priya's wall. "By the time I called back, her phone was disconnected. 2 days after that, her mother called me." The office was very quiet. "I need to go in," Naomi said. "Undercover. Lumiere is hiring in their styling department. I have the background to pass as a freelance stylist's assistant." I get inside, I find the direct link between the financial operation and Deja's death, and I come back with the full story. Priya looked at her for a long time. No direct contact with Baek family members. No unnecessary risks. The moment your cover feels compromised, you pull out. "Understood." "Naomi?" Priya's voice shifted. "I know what this is for you. That's exactly why I need you to be careful. Grief makes journalists do things that get them killed." "I know," Naomi said. She picked up the folder from Priya's desk and walked out. She had already decided she would probably break at least two of those conditions. She just hadn't decided which two yet. Lumiere Collective occupied 4 floors of a converted warehouse in the meatpacking district. From the outside, it looked like art. From the inside, once you knew what to look for, it looked like math specifically, the kind of math that made money disappear and reappear somewhere cleaner. As Aisha Brooks, stylist's assistant, Naomi spent 3 months learning the rhythm of the place. She cataloged invoice discrepancies in the shipping department. She photographed manifests that didn't add up. She cultivated a source in the accounting department, a quiet woman named Helen who had started asking questions of her own and was frightened enough to want someone else to ask them too. She was good at this. She had always been good at this. What she was less good at, it turned out, was finding the specific thread that tied Deja's death to the Bake family's decision-making rather than just their financial operation. The money laundering she could prove. The murder she was still chasing. By the night of the Fashion Week after-party, she was close. Helen had slipped word about a physical shipping document, an internal communication misfiled in a supply crate that used language that didn't match any legitimate business purpose. Naomi went backstage to find it. She found it. She photographed it. And then 2 men found her. Back in the corridor, Joo-hyun studied her with those unreadable eyes and said, "The badge says Meridian Press. The name on our payroll says Aisha Brooks, stylist's assistant. Which one is lying?" Naomi didn't flinch. 3 months of undercover work had taught her that the first person to show fear lost. "Aisha Brooks is my middle name. The badge is from a freelance contract. I cross over between both." It was a bad lie. They both knew it immediately. Joo-hyun looked at the badge in his security man's hand. Then he looked at Naomi. Something moved behind his eyes, not threat, not anger, something more like calculation running alongside something else she couldn't name. He held out his hand to his guard. The man placed the badge in it. Joo-hyun looked at it for exactly 3 seconds, then held it out to Naomi. "The party is that way," he said, nodding toward the far door. "I'd suggest staying on that side of the building for the rest of the evening." Naomi took the badge. Her fingers were steady. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," he said quietly. "Just leave." She left. She walked back into the noise and the lights and the crowd of the Fashion Week after-party, and she kept walking until she found a bathroom, went into the last stall, locked the door, sat down on the closed lid of the toilet, and allowed herself exactly 60 seconds to shake. Then she stopped, put her phone to her ear, called Marcus, her photographer backup stationed outside. "My cover might be burned," she said. "I need you to be ready to move." How burned? Joo-hyun himself. He had the badge. A silence. "Naomi! Pull out!" "Not yet." "What do you mean, not yet?" "He saw your—" "He let me go, Marcus. He had everything he needed to call the police, call his own security, have me removed and investigated. He let me go and told me to enjoy the party." She was already thinking, already rearranging pieces. "That means something. I just don't know what yet." She hung up, spent the rest of the party against the wall with a glass of water, watching Baek Joo-hyun work the room from a distance. He was good at it, effortlessly present with every conversation, never performing, never overdoing it. He listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, the people around him leaned in slightly, the way people do when someone says things worth hearing. Once, across the full length of the room, he glanced in her direction. She looked away first. Walking to the subway afterward, Naomi had a long, strictly professional argument with herself about the fact that she could not stop thinking about the way he had looked at her. Not with threat, not with contempt, with something that had felt uncomfortable and specific like recognition. She told herself it was journalist's instinct, pattern recognition, nothing else. She was already partially lying to herself, and she knew it. 1 week later, the Bake Arts Initiative held a public gallery opening in Chelsea. Emerging designers, half black, half Korean, genuine talent on every wall. Naomi attended as herself. Press credentials legitimate. Notebook in hand. It was a public event, there was nothing undercover about it. Joo-hyun was there. Of course he was. He saw her the moment she walked in. She watched him clock her from across the room, watched the brief stillness in his expression, and then he crossed toward her with unhurried, absolute confidence, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. "Miss Brooks," he said. "Or is it something else tonight?" "Naomi Prescott," she said. She had made a decision on the subway ride over. When in doubt, the truth was always a sharper tool than a lie. Investigative journalist, Meridian Press. I'm covering the initiative. And the after-party last week? Background research, context. In the service corridor. I got lost. He looked at her for a moment. You don't strike me as someone who gets lost. Mr. Bake. She met his eyes directly. Would you like to give me a tour of the exhibition? On record, if that makes it easier. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. Something more restrained and more interesting. On record, he repeated. Yes, I think I'd like that. They walked the exhibition for an hour. He spoke about the designers with the kind of knowledge that couldn't be faked, their specific influences, the precise ways the industry made certain doors harder to open for certain people, the particular talent he'd seen in each artist's earliest work. Naomi stopped in front of an installation, a piece built from torn magazine pages, all of them from issues where Black women appeared only in the back pages, if at all. What do you think? Joo-hyun asked. I think it's one of the most precise pieces of anger I've ever seen rendered as art, Naomi said. Anger or grief? She looked at him. Sometimes they're the same thing. He held her gaze. Yes, he said. Sometimes they are. After the gallery emptied, neither of them left. They ended up on the rooftop, neither having made a conscious decision to go there, both somehow arriving anyway with the city spread below them, and the conversation having moved so far from fashion that neither could have said exactly when the shift happened. He asked why she had become a journalist. She gave him the version she gave everyone. He asked what made her choose investigative work specifically. She looked at the skyline, thought about Deja, said, because some stories don't get told unless someone refuses to let them go. I understand that, he said. Better than you might expect. She wanted to ask what he meant. She filed it instead. Every journalist's reflex store it, return to it later. Before they parted, he handed her his card. If you're covering the initiative, you'll need direct access. Call me. She took the card. Their fingers brushed for half a second. She walked to the A train and called Marcus. I need everything we have on the Beck Arts Initiative. Tonight. Naomi? Marcus said. Are you in trouble? She looked at the card in her hand. Just send me the files. Over the next 2 weeks, Naomi used the art story as legitimate cover to spend time with Joo-hyun. It was strategic. She reminded herself of this frequently, and with decreasing conviction. He gave her access to the initiative's financial records. She combed through them looking for the laundering she knew was there. She found nothing. Every dollar was clean, documented, auditable. He had built a completely separate financial structure for the arts work, insulated from everything else his family operated, sealed off with a precision that looked deliberate. She noted it, didn't know what to do with it yet. What she did instead, what she could not seem to stop doing, was learn him. Coffee where she asked what he thought was wrong with the fashion industry, and he gave her an answer so specific and so honest that she forgot to write anything down for 10 full minutes. A Brooklyn gallery opening for one of the initiative's designers, where he arrived late, stood beside her without announcement, and they spent 45 minutes debating whether one particular installation was brilliant or self-indulgent. They disagreed completely. Neither backed down. She caught herself laughing and didn't stop. An afternoon in his personal studio above the initiative's offices, a room that was not on any public floor plan, and that he showed her with the careful hesitation of someone revealing something private. The walls were covered in design sketches, fabric samples pinned in color sequences that showed a specific, sophisticated eye. "These are yours," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, you design." "I used to." He said it the way people say things they have made peace with on the surface and are still arguing with underneath. "Why did you stop?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because some battles, you lose before you know you're in them." She turned from the wall and found him watching her with an expression that was not quite hidden enough. Something behind his eyes that had been carefully managed and had slipped, just slightly, in the afternoon light of that particular room. She looked away first, went back to the sketches, but her pulse had shifted and she knew it and she was furious at herself about it. That night, alone at her kitchen table at midnight, Naomi's source Helen came through. A final document, a thread of internal Lumiere communications from 3 years ago, the 6-month window surrounding Deja Monroe's death. Naomi opened the file. Read through invoice records, logistics memos, scheduling threads. And then, on page 11, she stopped breathing. An internal memo. Sender. M. Seo. Madam Seo Joo-hyun's mother. The Beck family matriarch. The subject line was blank. The body of the memo read, "The Monroe complication has drawn too much internal attention. Handle it discreetly before it becomes a public matter." No record. The Monroe complication. Deja Monroe. Handle it discreetly. Naomi sat with that sentence for a very long time. The apartment was completely silent around her. Outside, Brooklyn moved the way it always did, loud, continuous, indifferent. She opened her laptop, began to write. 2 days later, Joo-hyun called her at 8 a.m. His voice was different, careful in a way that her journalist's ear caught immediately. "I need to show you something," he said. "Can you come to the office?" She went. Kwon Tae-sung, Joo-hyun's right hand, a sharp-eyed man who had never once looked at Naomi without visible suspicion, was already in the office when she arrived. Joo-hyun dismissed him with a word. Tae-sung left without speaking, but the look he gave Naomi on his way out was the look of a man doing math whose answer he didn't like. Joo-hyun closed the door, put a folder on the desk between them. "Before I open this," he said, "I need to ask you something directly. The story you're writing, is it about the arts initiative?" The office was very quiet. "No," Naomi said. "Is it about Lumiere?" "Yes." "And is it about Deja Monroe?" The name. In his mouth. "In this office." Naomi went absolutely still. "How do you know that name?" "Because I have been investigating her death for 2 years." He opened the folder. "And I believe we have been looking at the same thing, from opposite sides of the same wall." Inside the folder, financial records she hadn't seen. A witness statement from a former Lumiere employee who had been present on the night Deja died and had been quietly relocated by Joo-hyun to another city 18 months ago for her own safety. And a thread of internal communications that overlapped with, but did not duplicate, what Helen had given Naomi. He had almost everything. Not quite enough to act alone. Naomi looked at the folder. Then she looked at him. "You've known for 2 years." "Yes." "And you didn't go to the police because the moment I move openly, my mother knows, and the witness disappears, and the evidence gets buried. I needed it airtight." He held her gaze. "And because exposing my mother exposes my family. I won't pretend that wasn't also a factor. You deserve the honest answer." She stood up, walked to the window. Below them, the city was performing its ordinary morning taxis. People, the relentless machinery of New York going about its business with no awareness of what was happening 10 floors above it. "Deja was my friend," Naomi said. She said it to the window. Couldn't quite say it to his face yet. "We were at Columbia together. She called me 2 weeks before she died. She told me something felt wrong at Lumiere. I told her to document everything and come to me when she had proof." A pause. "She left me a voicemail 3 days later, saying she had it. I was in the field. I didn't check my messages for 6 hours. The silence behind her was the kind that has weight. By the time I called back, Naomi said, her phone was disconnected. She stopped, took a breath, turned around. Ju Hee-hun was looking at her, and his expression had changed completely. The controlled, measured man who occupied boardrooms and navigated criminal infrastructure with cold precision was gone. What was left was something rawer, a man who had carried something heavy for 2 years and was looking at someone who understood the specific gravity of it. I didn't know, he said, that she was your friend. Naomi, I didn't know. Would it have changed anything? It would have changed how I looked for you. A pause. I might have found you sooner. She sat back down, pulled the chair close to the desk, opened her own folder, the one she had been carrying in her bag since midnight, and placed it beside his. Show me everything you have, she said. All of it. They worked until 3 a.m. At some point, Helen's memo and Ju Hyun's witness statement and the financial records from both investigations converged into something that was no longer almost enough. It was enough. It was more than enough. Madame Seo's culpability was no longer circumstantial. It was documented, corroborated, and devastating. Naomi sat back in her chair and looked at the papers spread across the desk between them. This is the story, she said. Yes, Ju Hyun said. Publishing it means. I know what it means. His voice was steady. My mother ordered the murder of a 24-year-old woman who had done nothing except discover something she wasn't supposed to see. Whatever it costs my family, it costs less than letting that stand. Naomi looked at him across the desk. This man she had come to expose. This man who had spent 2 years investigating his own mother for the same murder she had spent 3 years chasing. This man whose eyes, in the late-night quiet of an office full of evidence, were the most honest thing in the room. She thought of something she needed to say, filed it, said it anyway. I'm going to write the story. I know. It will name you. I know. Your family, the criminal operation, your mother, all of it. I know, Naomi. Something moved in his voice, not resignation, something closer to relief. Write it. Write every word of it. Deja Monroe deserves to have her name in print for the right reasons. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she closed the folder. I'll call my editor in the morning. Neither of them moved to leave. She told him about Deja, then not the journalist's version, not the careful account she had given Priya in the office 2 years ago, the real version, the phone call she hadn't picked up, the voicemail she'd listened to 47 times in the first year, the way Deja had laughed, too loud for indoor spaces, at things that weren't quite jokes, the way she had said, half serious and entirely meaning it, that she was going to change the fashion industry whether it wanted to be changed or not. Ju Hyun listened the way he always listened, completely, without filling silences that didn't need filling. When she finished, he said, She would have been extraordinary. Naomi looked at him. That was Deja's word. For herself. She said it all the time. Because anyone who made my mother feel threatened enough to act was extraordinary, he said quietly. My mother does not waste attention on ordinary people. It was the most brutal and most loving thing anyone had said about Deja Monroe in 3 years. Naomi felt it land somewhere behind her sternum and stay there. She kissed him then. Not planned, not strategic. Her hands found his face and she kissed him before she finished deciding to, and he went completely still for 1 full second, a stillness that felt like a man setting something down that he had been holding for a very long time, and then he kissed her back. It was nothing like she had prepared for. She had specifically not prepared for anything, which she had thought was the same as being prepared. It was not. When they broke apart, neither spoke immediately. The evidence was still spread across the desk between them. The city was still outside the window. Everything was exactly the same and completely different. I'm still going to write the story, she said. I know, he said. This doesn't change that. I know, Naomi. A silence. Then, quietly, he almost smiled. I'd think less of you, if it did. 2 days before publication, Kwon Tae-sung came back. He walked into Joo Hee-yoon's office where Naomi was reviewing final documents, laid a printed report on the desk, and said, "Her real name is Naomi Prescott. She's been undercover at Lumiere for 3 months. She has documented evidence of the financial operation, the Monroe memo from your mother, and a witness statement from the woman you relocated to Philadelphia. The story runs Sunday in the Meridian." He looked at Joo Hee-yoon. "You knew?" "Yes. You helped her." "I gave her evidence of my mother's crimes, yes." "Hyung!" Tae-sung's voice cracked slightly on the word the Korean for older brother, the word that carried everything between them. "This destroys the family." "This holds my mother accountable for ordering a murder," Joo Hee-yoon said. "Those are different things, even when they feel the same." Tae-sung looked at Naomi. His expression was not angry. It was something more complicated than anger, a man watching something he had spent his life protecting come apart, and not entirely certain it didn't deserve to. He left without another word. The room was quiet. "He's going to tell her," Naomi said. "Your mother. Before Sunday." "Probably. Are you in danger?" He looked at her. Something in his expression shifted, not amusement exactly, but close to it. The way a person looks when danger has become so familiar, it no longer performs itself. "My mother is dangerous," he said. "She's not reckless. Moving against me openly creates more problems for her than it solves, especially now that she knows the story is already written. And if you're wrong, then your story will be the most important thing the Meridian has ever published." He said it plainly, as a fact, without drama. Naomi stared at him. "That's not comforting." "No," he agreed. "But it's honest. And I think between us, honesty has always been the better option." She looked at this man who had loved design and been steered away from it, who had discovered his mother's order to kill a young woman and carried the weight of it alone for 2 years, who had handed her the evidence to dismantle his own family because it was right, and watched her prepare to use it without asking her to stop even once. She picked up her bag. "I'll call you after it runs." "I'll be here," he said. She believed him completely. The story ran on a Sunday morning. By noon, it was the most read piece in the Meridian's history. By evening, law enforcement executed warrants at Lumiere Collective, the kind of warrants that come when a publication has pre-briefed federal investigators with documented evidence rather than simply running a story and hoping someone acts. Madame Seo's lawyer released a statement before nightfall. It was careful and expensive and denied everything. The witness in Philadelphia went on record at the same moment the story published a video statement coordinated through protected channels, her voice steady and her hands folded in her lap, naming what she had seen and who had told her not to speak of it. By Monday, Madame Seo was under formal federal investigation. The collateral damage was real, and Naomi sat with every piece of it. The Bake Arts Initiative froze operations. 12 designers who had been scheduled to receive grants were suddenly in limbo, their futures suspended by a legal hold they had nothing to do with. 3 Lumiere employees who had known nothing about the laundering cleared out their desks. Naomi sat at her kitchen table reading through the responses to the story. Comments, emails, messages from people who knew the fashion industry's worst corners and had always known something like this existed. And then one message from a designer, a young black woman from Baltimore, 22 years old, who had been awarded her first major grant from the initiative before the freeze. "I heard what happened to Deja Monroe. I didn't know her. But I know what it is to be a black woman in this industry just trying to hold on to something. Thank you for not letting it go." Naomi read it 4 times. Then she closed her laptop and allowed herself, for the first time in 3 years, to cry properly. Not the controlled tears of a journalist managing her grief. The real kind. The kind that came from somewhere below the professional and the purposeful. From the place where Deja Monroe had lived in her loud and too big for indoor spaces. Deja, who had always known exactly what she wanted. She cried until she didn't need to anymore. Then she washed her face, made coffee, and called her editor. "The follow-up story," she said when Priya answered. "The designers affected by the freeze. I want to cover the path forward. The legitimate rebuild." A pause. "That's a very different kind of story from what you usually write." "I know," Naomi said. "I think I'm ready for a different kind of story." Ju Hun did not call after the story ran. She had not expected him to. The publication had named his family, detailed his mother's crimes, and detonated his world with precision and without sentiment. She had done what she came to do. She understood that there was a particular silence that followed that kind of thing, a silence that needed to be respected. 3 days after publication, she went to the initiative's offices anyway. She couldn't have said exactly why. The lights were off. The door was locked. She stood on the sidewalk outside and looked up at the darkened windows and thought about Deja, who had stood outside Lumiere's building 3 years ago, with documentation in her bag, and hoped she should not have had to surrender. She turned to leave. He was behind her. No suit today. Dark coat, open collar, hands in his pockets. He looked like someone who had not slept properly in 3 days, which he probably hadn't. But he was standing straight, and his eyes, when they found hers, were clear. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I wasn't sure either," Naomi said honestly. A silence that was not uncomfortable. The city moved around them, indifferent and continuous. "The story was right," he said. "Every word. Deja deserved it. The people in that neighborhood deserved it. You did exactly what you came to do." "I know. I helped you do it. I would do it again." He looked at her steadily. "But I need to ask you something." "Ask." "When did it stop being about the story?" The question landed the way all his questions did, quietly, and exactly where it was aimed. Naomi was quiet for a moment. The honest answer had been sitting in her chest for 2 weeks, patient and inconvenient, waiting for exactly this question. "Sometime around a rooftop," she said, against my better judgment and significantly inconveniently. Something moved in his face. That almost smile she had catalogued so carefully over so many weeks, the one that appeared briefly and meant more than a full smile would have. "The initiative will rebuild," he said. "Cleanly, without the family infrastructure. I spoke to a lawyer 2 days ago. The grant recipients will be funded. It will take longer and it will look different, but it will happen." "And you?" He looked at the darkened office above them, at the building that had housed the only part of his world he had built by choice, for reasons that had nothing to do with obligation or inheritance or fear. "I'm going to design things," he said. Simply, like a door opening. Like a decision that had always been made and was only now being spoken aloud. It turns out that was always the plan. I was just the last one to understand it. Naomi looked at him, this man who had loved something and been steered away from it, who had spent 2 years carrying a secret that could have destroyed him if he'd let it, who had handed her everything she needed to do exactly that, and called it right. "Baek Ju-hyun," she said. "Naomi Prescott," he said back. "This is a terrible idea. Almost certainly. I investigate people like you for a living." "I'm aware." He looked at her steadily. "You're also the most honest person I have ever been in a room with. And I have spent my entire life surrounded by people performing honesty rather than practicing it." She held his gaze. The sidewalk was cold and the city was loud and Deja Monroe's name was in print in the Meridian's archives where it would stay forever, and somehow, in the middle of all of it, this was where she had ended up. "Ask me again in 6 months," she said. "What this is, where it goes. Ask me then." "I will," he said. She believed him. That was the thing. Against every professional instinct and personal caution she had spent 29 years carefully constructing, she believed him completely. Weeks later, Naomi was at her desk in Brooklyn working on a housing policy piece that was significantly less dangerous than anything she had done in 3 years. Her editor had given her options. She had chosen the work that kept her in the communities that had made her. It felt like coming home to a place she had left by accident. She had also, quietly and without making a public thing of it, been connecting the initiative's frozen grant recipients with alternative funding sources while Joo Hyun rebuilt the program's legal structure. She didn't report on it. It wasn't a story. It was just something she did on Tuesday evenings, sitting cross-legged on her apartment floor with her laptop and a list of names, and the particular satisfaction of watching closed doors open for people who deserved them. Joo Hyun came to Brooklyn for the first time on a Thursday. She had not asked him to. He had texted, "Can I come to you this time?" And she had said yes without deliberating, which was itself a kind of answer. He stood in her apartment and looked around at the small, loud, light-filled space that was nothing like anywhere he had ever spent time, at the walls covered in notes and photographs that she hadn't quite gotten around to taking down, at the plants on the windowsill and the books stacked in no particular order and the painting above her desk that Deja had given her sophomore year, abstract and brilliant and slightly too large for the wall. In the center of her investigation wall, still pinned exactly where it had been for 3 years, was a photograph of Deja Monroe, laughing at something off camera, 24 years old. The most alive she had ever looked in a photograph, which was how it always went with people you lost. Joo Hyun stood in front of it for a long time. "She looks like someone who knew exactly what she wanted," he said. "She always did," Naomi said. "From the first day I met her. She walked into our freshman orientation like she had already decided how it was going to go." He reached out, found Naomi's hand, held it the way someone holds something they are not performing for anyone, simply, deliberately, because they want to. They stood there together in the Thursday afternoon light of a Brooklyn apartment, looking at a photograph of a woman who had deserved more than she got, and who had gotten, at least, this. Her name in the right story, told by the right person, for the right reasons. "What happens now?" Joo Hyun asked. Naomi considered. The investigation was closed. The story was done. The 3 years that had defined her professional life had resolved into something she had not anticipated and could not have planned for a rebuilt initiative, a woman's name finally printed correctly, and a man standing in her apartment holding her hand like it was somewhere he intended to stay. "Now," she said, "we figure out what we are when we're not a secret." He looked at her. "Is that going to be a problem? Professionally?" "Probably," she said. "I'll manage." "And personally?" She looked at him, really looked, the way she had looked at things her whole career, without softening what was there. A man learning to build something of his own from the rubble of what his family had made. A man who had chosen honesty when it cost him everything and called it the only available option. A man who had looked at a photograph of her dead friend and found exactly the right words. "Ask me in 6 months," she said. "I will. Simple, certain. No performance in it." "I know," she thought. "That's the problem. That's the whole problem." Outside, Brooklyn was being Brooklyn, relentless and loud and beautiful and completely unbothered by anything happening in one small apartment on one ordinary Thursday. Naomi Prescott had spent 3 years chasing a story that began with a phone call she didn't pick up and ended with a man she hadn't been looking for. She had the byline. She had the justice. She had Deja's name in the right place at last. And standing in her apartment with Baek Joo-hyun's hand in hers, looking at a photograph of the woman who had started everything, Naomi thought that Deja Monroe, who had been loud in every room she entered, who had always known exactly what she wanted, who had walked into a corrupt institution thinking she could change it from the inside and had been proven right in the most devastating possible way, would have had an enormous amount to say about how this had turned out. Most of it, Naomi was certain, would have made her laugh. And for the first time in 3 years, that felt like enough. More than enough. It felt like something worth starting from. Thank you for watching till the end. If this story touched you, inspired you, or took you on a journey, don't leave without hitting the like button. Subscribe if you haven't and switch your notifications on. You don't want to miss what I got coming up. Make sure to drop in the comments section where in the world you're watching from. We're building a global community of story lovers here, and your voice is part of it. See you in the next one. Have a great day.